The night Alistair Blackwood first laid eyes upon Queen Lilith, he had been among the living for 27 years. Blood still pumped warm through his veins, and his heart still beat with the uncertain rhythm of mortality. He could not have known then that he would spend the next 1,000 years loving her, nor that her betrayal would leave him with an eternity of darkness far deeper than the one she had promised. The royal court of Nocturnalis hummed with whispered conversations, and the gentle clink of crystal goblets filled with crimson liquid too thick to be wine. Alistair stood against a marble pillar, observing the proceedings with the keen eye of a scholar rather than a participant. He had come to document the vampire court, not to join it. A visiting academic from the University of Edinburgh granted rare permission to witness the nocturnal society that existed in shadow alongside the human world. "You look painfully out of place, Professor Blackwood," came a voice like midnight silk beside him, "though I must say your discomfort is rather refreshing." Alistair turned to find himself staring into eyes so violet they seemed to hold galaxies within them. The woman who addressed him was ethereal, skin like alabaster, hair cascading in obsidian waves down to her waist, lips stained the color of mulberries. She wore a gown of dark velvet that pooled around her feet like spilled ink, making her appear to float rather than walk. "Queen Lilith," he managed, bowing awkwardly, his research having prepared him at least for the proper address. "I apologize if my presence disrupts your court. I am merely an observer." "An observer," she repeated, tasting the word as though it were an exotic delicacy. "How curious that you believe you can observe us without becoming part of what you see." A smile played at the corners of her mouth, revealing the faintest hint of fangs. "Nothing enters my realm without transformation, Professor, not even light itself." Her words carried both warning and invitation. Alistair, despite his scholarly detachment, felt something ancient and primal stir within him. A recognition of danger, coupled with an inexplicable desire to move closer to it. "I've studied your kind for years," he said, finding his voice, "but texts and second-hand accounts fall woefully short of the reality." "And what reality do you perceive, human?" She circled him slowly, her gown whispering against the marble floor. "A civilization that has evolved alongside our own, yet remains untouched by time." He met her gaze directly, something few mortals dared. "You've witnessed empires rise and fall, yet your own society remains remarkably constant. Is that admiration I detect in your voice, Professor?" "Intellectual curiosity," he corrected, though not entirely truthfully. Her laugh was like crystal breaking in slow motion. "Come, walk with me. I find myself suddenly famished for conversation that doesn't reek of sycophancy." That night marked the beginning of Alistair's descent, though he would have called it an ascension. For 3 months he continued his research at court, each evening finding himself drawn more deeply into Lilith's orbit. She seemed equally fascinated by him, a mortal who looked upon her world not with fear or worship, but with genuine understanding. On the night everything changed. A winter storm lashed at the ancient castle windows. Alistair sat with Lilith in her private library, surrounded by volumes older than most civilizations. "Your research concludes tomorrow," she said, running a finger along the spine of a book without looking at him. "You will return to your university, publish your findings, and live out your brief mortal existence." "Yes," he replied, though the thought brought him unexpected pain. "Or," she continued, finally meeting his gaze, "you could stay." The word hung between them, heavy with implication. "Stay," he repeated. "As what?" "As mine." She moved toward him with supernatural grace. "I have ruled alone for 3 millennia, Alistair. I have had consorts and companions, but never an equal. Never someone who sees the world as I do, with both the passion of the present and the perspective of ages." "You're offering to turn me," he whispered, his scholar's mind racing through all he knew of the transformation, the agony, the hunger, the irreversible severance from humanity. "I'm offering you eternity." She stood before him now, close enough that he could smell the ancient perfume on her skin, frankincense and myrrh, the scent of temples and tombs. Not as a subject, but as my consort, to rule beside me, to learn and grow as immortals together. Why me? His voice was barely audible. Her cold fingers traced his jawline. Because in 1,000 years I have never met a mortal who looked at me and saw neither monster nor goddess, but simply me. That night, as snow blanketed the world outside in silence, Alistair died in Lilith's arms and was reborn in her image. The transformation was everything the texts had described, and nothing they had prepared him for, a symphony of pain followed by a clarity of senses so acute that the world seemed newly created around him. The hunger will be overwhelming at first, Lilith told him as he took his first breaths as an immortal. But it will pass. All things pass, my love, except us. The decades that followed unfurled like the petals of a night-blooming flower. Alistair learned the ways of immortality, how to hunt, how to blend among humans when necessary, how to harness the supernatural strength and senses that now defined his existence. But more importantly, he learned Lilith, her moods, which shifted like weather patterns across centuries, her passions, which burned with the intensity of stars, her wisdom, accumulated over millennia of watching civilizations bloom and wither. Together, they ruled the court of Nocturnalis with a blend of tradition and innovation. Alistair brought his academic's mind to bear on vampire society, introducing reforms that strengthened their position in a world increasingly dominated by human technology and expansion. Lilith tempered his idealism with her ancient pragmatism, ensuring their kind remained hidden yet prosperous. And they loved. Gods, how they loved, with the ferocity of immortals who had all of time before them yet understood the preciousness of each moment. They hunted together beneath silver moons, danced in ballrooms long abandoned by humans, made love in crypts and palaces, and once, memorably, in the newly constructed Paris catacombs as the French Revolution raged above. A century passed, then two. Human empires expanded and contracted. Wars blazed across continents like wildfire. The industrial age gave way to electricity, automobiles, airplanes. Through it all, Alistair and Lilith remained constants for each other. Evolving, certainly, but together. I never understood the true meaning of eternity until I had someone to share it with, Lilith told him one night as they stood on the balcony of their castle in the Carpathian Mountains, watching the distant lights of a world entering the 20th century. Alistair took her hand, still marveling after centuries at the perfect fit of her fingers between his. And I never understood that immortality isn't about endless time, but about depth of experience. Each moment with you contains infinities. Yet shadows lingered at the edges of their paradise. The court of Nocturnalis was ancient, bound by laws and prophecies predating even Lilith herself. Chief among these was the prophecy of Crimson Renewal, a cryptic text suggesting that vampire rule must periodically be refreshed by conflict and sacrifice. It's merely symbolic, Lilith assured him when the prophecy was discussed at council meetings. A relic from our more savage past. But as they approached their 5th century together, whispers began circulating through the court. Murmurs of stagnation, of powers waning, of the need for renewal. The more conservative factions, led by Duke Severin, an ancient vampire who had once courted Lilith himself, began openly advocating for a return to traditional ways. They fear change, Alistair said dismissively after a particularly contentious council session. All old things do. Lilith's expression had been uncharacteristically troubled. Perhaps we have grown complacent in our happiness. As their millennium together approached, the pressure mounted. Severin's faction gained support among the elder vampires, those who remembered the days of conquest and uninhibited feeding. They spoke of human encroachment, of the need for vampires to reclaim their position as apex predators rather than shadows. The night of their 1000th anniversary, Alistair prepared a celebration unlike any other. He had spent decades secretly acquiring artifacts meaningful to their journey together. The quill with which he had taken his first notes at court, a pressed flower from the garden where they had first kissed, the dagger with which she had opened her vein to turn him. He arranged these treasures in the ancient observatory at the highest tower of their castle, along with a gift he had commissioned from the most skilled vampire artisan in Venice, a celestial map showing the exact position of the stars on the night they had met, crafted in silver and sapphires. As midnight approached, Alistair waited, his excitement nearly palpable. But Lilith did not come. An hour passed, then another. Concern replaced anticipation. In 1,000 years, she had never failed to meet him without sending word. He descended from the tower, moving through the castle with increasing urgency. The corridors were strangely empty, the usual guards absent from their posts. When he reached the Grand Council chamber, he found the massive doors locked, unprecedented during his tenure as consort. Something cold and terrible settled in his undead heart. Using his supernatural strength, he tore the ancient doors from their hinges, the wood splintering like kindling in his hands. The scene that greeted him would be seared into his memory for all eternity. The council chamber had been transformed into a ritual space. Black candles formed a massive circle around the center of the room, where Lilith stood atop a dais of obsidian. She wore ceremonial robes of deepest crimson, her hair bound up with thorned silver. Around her, the 12 elder members of the court knelt in supplication, and at her feet, bound in chains of blessed silver that burned his flesh, was a human man, young, terrified, and hauntingly familiar. "Jonathan," Alistair breathed, recognizing the great-great-great-grandson of his own mortal brother. The family resemblance was unmistakable, the same eyes that had once looked out from his own human face. Lilith's gaze met his, and for the first time in a millennium he could not read the emotion there. "The prophecy of crimson renewal requires sacrifice," she said, her voice carrying the weight of ages. "Blood of the ruler's blood, willingly spilled by the ruler's hand." "This is madness." Alistair stepped forward, only to find his path blocked by an invisible barrier. "Lilith, we dismissed these ancient rites centuries ago, and our power has waned accordingly." Duke Severin's voice came from the shadows behind the throne. "The Queen has seen reason at last." "He bears your bloodline," Lilith continued, as though Severin had not spoken. "The last living descendant of your mortal family. With his sacrifice, our rule will be secured for another 1,000 years. Our rule." Alistair pressed his hands against the magical barrier, feeling it burn against his skin. "Or yours." Something flickered across Lilith's perfect features, regret, perhaps, or resolution. "The throne has always been mine, beloved. You were my consort, my companion, my greatest love. But Nocturnalis requires a sovereign, not a partnership." 1,000 years, Alistair whispered, the betrayal cutting deeper than any blade ever could. 1,000 years we ruled together, loved together, and now you choose a throne over what we built? I choose survival. She raised an ancient silver dagger, the very one with which she had turned him. The prophecy must be fulfilled. As the dagger descended toward Jonathan's exposed throat, Alistair felt something within him shatter and reform, harder, colder, more terrible than anything he had become in his transformation from mortal to vampire. The barrier between them might hold against his body, but not against the full force of his betrayed love and rage. With a roar that shook the very foundations of the castle, he channeled a millennium of power into a single, devastating surge of will. The magical barrier exploded outward in shards of arcane energy, sending the elders flying backward. Before any could recover, Alistair was across the chamber, the silver dagger wrenched from Lilith's grasp. Their eyes met, violet galaxies against eyes now black with fury and pain. "If you do this," she whispered, "there can be no return. The court will never accept defiance of the prophecy. Alistair looked from her to the terrified human who shared his blood, then back to the woman he had loved through 10 centuries of darkness. "Then, perhaps," he said softly, the dagger glinting in his hand, "it is time for a new court to rise from the ashes of your betrayal." In a single fluid motion, Alistair severed the silver chains binding Jonathan, the blessed metal sizzling against his immortal skin. The council chamber erupted in hisses of outrage as he pulled his human descendant to his feet. "This ends now," Alistair declared, positioning himself between Jonathan and the advancing elders. "No blood will be spilled tonight for your superstitions." Lilith remained unnaturally still, her expression a mask of regal detachment that Alistair had never seen directed at him in their 1,000 years together. Only the slightest tremor in her hand betrayed any emotion at all. "You cannot defy the prophecy," Duke Severin snarled, his aristocratic features contorted with rage. "The Queen has made her decision." "And I have made mine," Alistair replied, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. He turned to Lilith, searching her ancient eyes for any trace of the woman who had walked with him through millennia. 1,000 years, Lilith. Did they mean nothing? For one heartbeat, just one, something flickered behind her violet gaze, something vulnerable and almost human. Then it vanished, submerged beneath the implacable will that had kept her on the throne since before the birth of Christ. "They meant everything," she whispered. "Words meant only for him, despite the preternatural hearing of all present. But eternity demands sacrifices you cannot understand." "I understand betrayal perfectly well," Alistair replied, the coldness in his voice matching hers. With supernatural speed he swept Jonathan into his arms and back toward the chamber's enormous stained-glass window depicting the ancient founding of Nocturnalis. The elders moved to intercept him, fangs extended, centuries of predatory instinct overriding courtly decorum. Alistair had anticipated this. In one smooth movement, he hurled the silver dagger at the central chandelier. The enchanted blade severed the ancient chain, sending the massive construction of iron and crystal crashing down, temporarily blocking the vampire's advance. "This is not over," he promised Lilith, his voice carrying over the chaos. Then, clutching his terrified descendant, Alistair crashed backward through the stained glass, the ancient scene of vampire ascendancy shattering around them as they plummeted into the night. They fell 12 stories, glass raining around them like diamond tears. Jonathan screamed, but Alistair held him firmly, twisting mid-air to absorb the impact as they crashed through the lower terrace roof and landed hard on the stone floor of the castle's exterior colonnade. Pain lanced through Alistair's body, but he was moving before it could register, dragging Jonathan into the shadows as the alarm bells began to toll throughout the castle complex. "What? Who are you?" Jonathan gasped, his English accented with the cadence of the modern era. "What the hell is happening?" "There's no time," Alistair replied, pulling him through a concealed door into a narrow passage. "I'm your ancestor, and I've just made enemies of the most dangerous beings on Earth to save your life. If we don't reach safety before dawn, that effort will have been wasted." The hidden corridor, one of dozens Alistair had discovered over centuries of curious exploration, led them deep beneath the castle foundations, into tunnels predating even vampire occupation. Damp stone glistened in the darkness that posed no obstacle to Alistair's supernatural sight. "I can't see anything," Jonathan protested, stumbling blindly beside him. With a muttered curse, Alistair remembered his companion's humanity. He paused to retrieve an emergency torch from an ancient alcove where he'd hidden supplies centuries ago, a habit from his scholarly days that had never quite abandoned him. The modern LED flashlight illuminated Jonathan's face properly for the first time, and Alistair felt an uncanny dissonance looking at features so like his own mortal ones. The young man, perhaps 25, had the same Blackwood brow and jawline, though his eyes carried a hardness Alistair didn't recognize from his human days. "You're bleeding," Jonathan observed, pointing to the numerous lacerations from the shattered window that crosshatched Alistair's pale skin. "It's nothing. The wounds are already closing." Indeed, the vampire's flesh knit itself together even as they watched, the smaller cuts vanishing entirely while the deeper ones faded to pink lines. "How did they find you? How did she find you?" Jonathan's face darkened. "I'm an archaeologist. I was in Romania investigating folklore connections to actual historical sites. 2 weeks ago, someone broke into my hotel room and stole DNA samples I'd submitted for a genealogy project. 3 days later, I was drugged and abducted. I woke up in this nightmare castle with people drinking blood from goblets and calling me the last Blackwood." Alistair's dead heart seemed to contract painfully. "She must have been planning this for years," he murmured, more to himself than to Jonathan, "monitoring my bloodline, waiting for the perfect moment." They continued through the tunnels, the distant sounds of pursuit growing fainter as they descended deeper beneath the mountain. Alistair led them to a natural cavern where an underground river flowed swift and black in the flashlight's beam. "This river emerges 5 miles from here," he explained, pulling a waterproof pack from behind a rock formation. "We'll follow it underground as far as we can, then surface far from the castle." Jonathan eyed the churning water warily. "I'm not sure I can swim that." "You won't need to." Alistair withdrew a small, inflatable raft from the pack, another modern addition to his emergency supplies. "The current will do most of the work." As he prepared their escape, a question nagged at him. "Jonathan, what exactly did they tell you about the ceremony, about why you were chosen?" The young man shuddered visibly. "The woman, Lilith, she said I carried ancient blood, that my death would complete a circle begun 1,000 years ago. She spoke about it like she was doing me an honor." His voice cracked slightly. "She showed me portraits of a man who looked like me, said he was my ancestor who had ascended to their kind." "That would be me," Alistair said quietly, meeting Jonathan's incredulous stare. "I was a professor at Edinburgh in 1023. I came to study their kind and ended up becoming one of them. For 1,000 years I believed I had found something eternal and true. Tonight proved otherwise." The distant echo of voices reached them before Jonathan could respond, the hunting party, having discovered the hidden passage. Alistair hurriedly deployed the raft and ushered Jonathan aboard. "They can track my scent," he explained, pushing the craft into the current, "but water will confuse it. Stay low and hold tight. This journey won't be gentle." The underground river carried them swiftly through the mountain's heart, through chambers that had never known human presence and passages so narrow they had to lie flat in the raft to avoid the stalactites. Throughout their flight, Alistair's mind worked furiously, reassessing 1,000 years of memories in the harsh light of Lilith's betrayal. Had she always intended to use me this way? He wondered aloud as they navigated a particularly treacherous stretch. Was everything, our love, our rule, our very existence together, merely preparation for this moment? "Maybe she did love you," Jonathan offered unexpectedly. "During the 3 days they held me, I watched her. When she spoke of you, there was something in her eyes, something almost human." Alistair's laugh held no humor. "After 1,000 years, I thought I knew every expression those eyes could hold. Yet tonight, looking at her, it was like staring at a stranger." He paused, steering them around a jagged rock formation. "The most terrifying part is that I still love her, even now. A millennium of devotion doesn't vanish in a single night, even one as catastrophic as this." They emerged from the mountain just as the eastern sky began to lighten imperceptibly, a warning no human would detect, but that sent primal alarm through Alistair's undead nervous system. Dawn was approaching, and with it his vulnerability. They abandoned the raft at a small, pebbled beach and made their way through dense forest to a road where Alistair had maintained an emergency cache for centuries. The small, weatherproof container held cash in various currencies, identification documents, and keys to a vehicle hidden nearby. "You've prepared well for someone who never expected to flee," Jonathan observed, as Alistair unlocked the camouflage garage built into a hillside. Immortality teaches caution, if nothing else. Alistair uncovered a sleek black car with tinted windows. When you've lived through as many regime changes and witch hunts as I have, you learn to maintain escape routes. They drove in tense silence as the sky lightened. Alistair could feel the approaching dawn, like a physical pressure against his skin. Every vampire knew the legends of what sunlight did to their kind, legends that, unlike many human misconceptions, were fundamentally true. Modern vampires had developed some protections, specialized garments, tinted vehicles, synthetic blood alternatives, but direct sunlight remained lethal. "There's a safe house in Sibiu," Alistair explained, pushing the car faster along the winding mountain roads. "We need to reach it before sunrise." "What happens then?" Jonathan asked, studying his inhuman ancestor with a mixture of fear and fascination. "What's your plan?" "First, survival. Then," Alistair's hands tightened on the steering wheel, "then I find out exactly what prophecy was worth destroying everything we built. There are older texts, manuscripts Lilith kept sealed even from me. If I'm to understand her betrayal and counter it, I need to know what she knows." They reached the outskirts of Sibiu with less than 30 minutes before sunrise. The safe house, a modernized medieval structure with bricked-up windows and redundant security systems, had been maintained for centuries as one of many bolt holes Alistair had established throughout Europe. As he deactivated the security system and ushered Jonathan inside, Alistair felt the first true wave of exhaustion hit him. Not physical fatigue. Vampires didn't experience that in the human sense, but a soul-deep weariness that came from having the foundations of his existence upended in a single night. "There's a bedroom upstairs," he told Jonathan, moving through the darkened house with practiced ease. "Food in the kitchen. This place is stocked and secure. No one from the court knows about it." Jonathan hesitated in the entryway, suddenly looking every bit the lost young academic thrust into a nightmare. "What do I call you? Professor Blackwood, Lord Alistair, great-whatever grandfather?" Despite everything, Alistair found himself smiling faintly. "Alistair will do. We're well beyond formalities at this point." While Jonathan explored the house, Alistair descended to the basement, where a specialized chamber provided absolute darkness and security for daylight hours. As he prepared for his daytime dormancy, he accessed a hidden safe containing his most precious emergency resource, a satellite phone connected to the only network of allies he maintained separate from the court. The call connected after 3 rings. "This had better be apocalyptic," came an irritable female voice with a faint Scandinavian accent. "It's the middle of my exhibition opening." "Hello, Freya," Alistair said wearily. "I'm afraid it is rather apocalyptic, at least for me. Lilith has betrayed me. The prophecy of crimson renewal is in motion." The silence on the other end lasted 3 full seconds, an eternity for someone like Freya Ravensdatter, a vampire nearly as old as Lilith herself and twice as impatient. "Well, shit," she finally replied, her gallery opening decorum abandoned. "I told you 500 years ago that woman would break your heart. I just didn't expect it to take this long." Her tone softened marginally. "Are you safe for the day?" "Yes. I've rescued the intended sacrifice, my own descendant, if you can believe it. We're secure for now, but I need information. The complete text of the prophecy, the unredacted version. That's kept in the Vatican's secret archives," Freya said, her voice dropping lower. "Even I don't have access." "But Marcel does," Alistair pressed. "He's been infiltrating their ranks for centuries." Freya sighed audibly. "I'll contact him. But Alistair, if Lilith has committed to the renewal ritual, you're facing more than just a lover's quarrel. The ritual requires specific steps, carried out in precise order. Your descendant's blood is only the beginning." Cold dread pooled in Alistair's stomach. "What else does it require?" "I don't know the details, but the legends say the prophecy demands 3 sacrifices: blood of the past, heart of the present and soul of the future. If your mortal descendant was meant to be the blood sacrifice, then there are two more to come, Alistair finished grimly. And I've only disrupted the first part of her plan. Precisely. Stay hidden. I'll gather what information I can and come to you. A pause, then, with uncharacteristic gentleness. I'm sorry, old friend. 1,000 years is a long time, even for our kind. After ending the call, Alistair sat motionless in the darkness, allowing himself a moment of raw grief. A millennium of memories cascaded through his mind. Lilith, laughing beneath a medieval moon, her eyes alight with mischief as they raced through ancient forests. Lilith, fierce in battle during the vampire wars of the 1400s. Lilith, tender in rare moments of vulnerability, admitting fears she showed to no other soul. Lilith, passionate, powerful, eternal, his North Star in the endless night of immortality. Gone, or worse, revealed as an illusion he had willingly embraced. His reverie was interrupted by footsteps on the stairs. Jonathan appeared in the doorway, his face grim in the dim emergency lighting. "I found something upstairs you should see," he said without preamble. "A message. It was slipped under the front door while you were down here." He handed Alistair a small scroll, sealed with black wax, impressed with a symbol Alistair hadn't seen in centuries. Lilith's personal sigil from before their union, when she ruled alone. With fingers that almost trembled, Alistair broke the seal. Inside, written in elegant script in ink that glistened with an iridescence only vampire eyes could fully perceive, was a message that made his undead blood run colder still. "Beloved, the wheel turns as it must. What begins in blood must end in blood. You have taken what was rightfully mine to sacrifice, so I shall take what is precious to you in return. The second sacrifice approaches, the heart of the present. By sunset tomorrow, another you love will feed the prophecy. This path was written before either of us walked the earth. Fight if you must, but know that in the end, even you will understand the necessity of what I do. Until the end of all things, L." Alistair looked up from the parchment, meeting Jonathan's concerned gaze with growing horror. "She's going after someone else I care about," he whispered. "But who? After 1,000 years, everyone I knew from my human life is long dead." Jonathan frowned, studying the message over Alistair's shoulder. "Could it be another vampire? Someone from the court who sided with you?" "No one sided with me," Alistair replied bitterly, "but there are those outside the court. Other vampires I've maintained connections with over the centuries. Freya, Marcel, Casimir, a handful of others." He paced the secure chamber, mind racing. "But how would she know which ones matter most to me? I've been careful to keep my external relationships private, precisely to prevent them being used as leverage." A terrible thought struck him mid-stride. "Unless..." He turned to Jonathan, a new urgency in his voice. "The genealogy research you mentioned, how extensive was it?" "Quite thorough. I traced the Blackwood line back 12 generations before hitting a dead end around 1000 CE. Jonathan's eyes widened with sudden understanding. "You think there are other descendants, other branches of your family still living?" "It's possible. Before I was turned, I had a brother, William. He had already married and had a son when I left for my research expedition to Romania. I never returned, of course, but I monitored the family from afar for several centuries." Alistair moved to a concealed panel in the wall, revealing an ancient laptop that looked incongruously modern in the medieval stone chamber. "If Lilith found you through genealogical research, she may have identified other living Blackwoods. The heart of the present could be another descendant, someone representing my current connection to humanity." As the computer booted up, Jonathan watched with growing apprehension. "But how would she choose which descendant represents the heart?" "I was the blood, because I'm the most direct descendant of your brother, according to what they told me." Alistair accessed a secure database, fingers flying over the keys with preternatural speed. The prophecy speaks in symbolic terms. The heart of the present would be someone who embodies what matters most to me now, or what would hurt most to lose. The database yielded results that made Alistair freeze in shock. There on the screen was a name he had not allowed himself to think about in decades. Dr. Eleanor Blackwood, Professor of Medieval Literature at Oxford University. Beside her name was a photograph of a woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and the unmistakable Blackwood features. "Eleanor," Alistair whispered, a complex emotion crossing his face. William's descendant through his daughter's line. "You know her?" Jonathan asked, studying the photograph. "I've watched over her from a distance. 30 years ago, when she was just a teenager, she was in a car accident in London. She was dying when I found her. Alistair hesitated. "I gave her my blood to heal her, then removed the memory of our encounter, but vampire blood creates a connection. She's carried a trace of me within her ever since." Understanding dawned on Jonathan's face. "So she's not just your descendant. She's bound to you by blood magic. That would make her the perfect heart sacrifice." Alistair nodded grimly, closing the laptop with sudden decision. "Dawn is minutes away. I'll be dormant until sunset, unable to leave this chamber without burning to ash. But you can move in daylight. What are you asking me to do?" "I need you to warn Eleanor. The safe house has a garage with another vehicle. Take it to London. The keys and GPS directions are in the kitchen drawer. Find her at Oxford and convince her to go into hiding until I can reach you both." "And how exactly am I supposed to convince a respected professor that her ancient vampire ancestor needs her to hide from her even more ancient vampire queen?" Jonathan asked incredulously. Alistair removed an antique ring from his finger, a silver band set with a black stone flecked with crimson that seemed to move within the gem's depths. "Show her this. The blood connection will make her recognize it. Tell her the name she heard in her dreams after the accident, Strigoi Moor. It will trigger the submerged memory enough for her to know you're telling the truth." Jonathan accepted the ring with obvious trepidation. "And if Lilith's people are already watching her, then you may be walking into a trap," Alistair admitted, the weight of 1,000 years pressing down upon him. "But if we do nothing, Eleanor dies at sunset tomorrow. The prophecy will advance one step closer to completion, and whatever cataclysm Lilith believes she's preventing by these sacrifices will come one step closer to being averted. The first deadly ray of dawn light would soon breach the horizon. Alistair could feel it approaching like a physical pain. "I'm trusting you with everything, Jonathan Blackwood," he said, his voice taking on the formal cadence of his medieval origins. "With my family's survival and perhaps with the future of both our species. Go now quickly, while darkness still offers you some protection." As Jonathan turned to leave, Alistair called after him one last thing. "And Jonathan, if you encounter Lilith herself, do not look into her eyes, no matter what she promises, no matter what she threatens. 1,000 years of loving her has taught me this, if nothing else. Her gaze contains galaxies in which a human soul can drown without a trace." The heavy door sealed behind Jonathan, leaving Alistair alone in perfect darkness as the sun breached the horizon. As his consciousness began to fade into daylight dormancy, one thought burned brighter than all others. If Lilith had indeed orchestrated this betrayal over centuries, selecting his descendants as sacrificial lambs while sharing his bed and his throne, then the woman he had loved was capable of far darker designs than he had ever imagined. And if that were true, then the third sacrifice, the soul of the future, would be something more terrible than he dared contemplate. As the last crimson threads of sunset faded from the Romanian sky, Alistair awoke with a violent gasp. His mind immediately cleared of the daylight torpor, returning to the dire reality he now faced. The clock on the wall confirmed his fears. 14 hours had passed. Jonathan had been gone all day, attempting to reach Eleanor before Lilith's agents. With preternatural speed, Alistair reached for his phone. No messages, no missed calls. Either Jonathan had failed to make contact, Or worse, he'd been intercepted. "Damn it all," Alistair muttered, quickly accessing the hidden armory concealed behind a medieval tapestry. He selected weapons both ancient and modern. A silver-bladed sword that had served him in the vampire wars of the 15th century, and a modern pistol loaded with specialized ammunition, hollow-point bullets filled with a compound lethal even to immortals. As he armed himself, a soft chime from his laptop broke the silence. An encrypted message from Freya. "Marcel accessed the Vatican archives. Prophecy text more complex than we thought. Not just 3 sacrifices. They form a key. Blood unlocks the door. Heart turns the lock. Soul opens the way. But to what? Something about the first darkness returning. Text damaged there. Marcel continuing search. Be careful. Unusual vampire activity reported throughout Europe tonight. They're searching for you. We'll reach Sibiu by midnight. Stay hidden." Alistair's hands stilled over the keyboard. The first darkness? In all their centuries together, Lilith had spoken only once of the primordial origins of vampire kind, of a darkness that predated even her ancient existence. She had called it the wellspring and refused to elaborate further, her expression haunted in a way that had struck him even then. His contemplation was interrupted by the security system's subtle alert, motion at the perimeter. Alistair moved silently to the surveillance monitors, muscles tensed for immediate action. The cameras showed a solitary figure staggering toward the safe house, clutching something against their chest. "Jonathan," Alistair breathed, recognizing the stumbling gait. He disarmed the security and rushed to the entrance, yanking open the heavy door, just as his descendant collapsed forward into his arms. "I couldn't," Jonathan gasped, his shirt soaked with blood. They were waiting. Alistair carried him inside, laying him on a couch and quickly assessing his injuries. A deep knife wound in his side, defensive cuts on his hands and arms, but nothing immediately fatal. More concerning was the haunted look in the young man's eyes. "Eleanor?" Alistair asked, already dreading the answer. Jonathan shook his head, wincing as Alistair applied pressure to his wound. "Too late. I got to Oxford, found her office. Everything was ransacked. Her assistant was there, terrified. Said men with strange eyes had taken her the previous night." He fumbled in his pocket, withdrawing a crumpled, blood-stained note. "They left this for you." With trembling fingers, Alistair unfolded the paper. Inside was a single lock of auburn hair, wrapped in parchment bearing Lilith's elegant script. "The heart beats its last at midnight. Kharkov Castle. Come alone, or the rhythm stops prematurely." Cold fury washed through him, crystallizing into deadly resolve. "How did you escape?" he asked Jonathan, already moving to gather medical supplies. "Wasn't supposed to." Jonathan grimaced as Alistair cleaned his wound. "One stayed behind to finish me. Said Lilith wanted you to get the message, but not any help. I got lucky. Managed to stab him with a letter opener from Eleanor's desk. Silver handle. Slowed him down enough for me to escape." Alistair's eyebrows raised slightly. "You stabbed a vampire with a letter opener and lived?" The Blackwood resourcefulness apparently survived the centuries intact. As he bandaged Jonathan's injuries, Alistair's mind raced through possibilities. Kharkov Castle was one of the oldest vampire strongholds in Eastern Europe, predating even Lilith's reign. Its location, in the remotest mountains of northern Romania, was strategic, far from human habitation, surrounded by treacherous terrain. "I need to go after her," he said, securing the last bandage. "Eleanor doesn't deserve to die for the crime of carrying my bloodline." Jonathan struggled to sit up. "It's obviously a trap." "Obviously. But you're going anyway." Alistair moved to a hidden cabinet, withdrawing several vials of dark red liquid. "I've lived 1,000 years by springing traps on my own terms." He tossed one vial to Jonathan. "Synthetic blood, enhanced with healing properties. Drink it, it will accelerate your recovery." Jonathan eyed the vial suspiciously before uncapping it with a grimace. "What's your plan? You can't just walk in there alone." "That's exactly what I'm going to do." Alistair's voice carried the weight of centuries of command. But first, I need to understand what Lilith truly wants. This isn't merely about fulfilling some ancient prophecy. She spent a millennium with me, sharing power, sharing eternity. To risk all that, the stakes must be unfathomably high. He returned to the laptop, fingers flying across the keys as he accessed databases and repositories of occult knowledge he'd digitized over centuries. The prophecy speaks of the first darkness returning. In vampire mythology, the first darkness refers to our origin, the primordial entity that created the first vampire. Jonathan moved carefully to look over his shoulder. You mean like a vampire patient zero? More than that. Alistair pulled up an ancient text, the characters barely recognizable as language. The oldest texts suggest vampires weren't created by infection or curse, but were manifestations of an ancient darkness that existed before humanity. A consciousness that found physical form by inhabiting human bodies. That's terrifying, Jonathan said quietly. Indeed. And Lilith is old enough to know the truth of it. Alistair's expression darkened. What if the prophecy of Crimson Renewal isn't about renewing vampire rule, but about preventing this original darkness from returning? What if these sacrifices are a form of containment, not empowerment? Before Jonathan could respond, the laptop chimed again. Another message from Freya. Urgent. Marcel found final pages of prophecy. 3 sacrifices create a seal, not break one. Without completion, ancient darkness escapes, last performed 1,000 years ago. Timing matches your turning, Alistair. Coming to you now. Do not confront Lilith alone. The pieces suddenly aligned in Alistair's mind with terrible clarity. My God, he whispered. It was never about betrayal. Jonathan looked between the message and Alistair's stunned face. What does it mean? It means Lilith turned me for a purpose greater than love. Alistair's voice was hollow. 1,000 years ago, she performed the ritual last time, creating a seal to contain this primordial darkness. The seal lasts a millennium before it must be renewed. And you were part of that ritual? How? Alistair closed his eyes, remembering his transformation night with new understanding. The night she turned me, there was an alignment of stars she said occurred only once every 1,000 years. She took my blood, gave me hers, and then we... He trailed off, the memory too intimate to share. Afterward, she performed an incantation I didn't understand. I thought it was part of the traditional turning ritual. He stood abruptly, gathering his weapons with renewed purpose. It wasn't love that brought us together. It was cosmic timing. I was never her consort. I was her insurance policy. 1,000 years of grooming my bloodline to ensure she'd have the perfect sacrifices when the time came to renew the seal. The bitterness in his voice couldn't fully mask the pain beneath. A millennium of memories recontextualized in an instant. Every tender moment, every passionate embrace, every whispered promise potentially calculated for this ultimate end. But if completing the ritual prevents something worse, Jonathan reasoned, isn't that worth the sacrifice? Alistair strapped the sword to his back, his movements precise and controlled despite his inner turmoil. Not Eleanor's sacrifice. Not the sacrifice of any more of my bloodline. He checked the pistol before holstering it. There must be another way. And if there isn't... Alistair paused at the door, his silhouette cutting a sharp edge against the night beyond. Then I'll make one. The journey to Kharkov Castle would take an ordinary traveller days of treacherous mountain travel. For Alistair, moving with vampire speed through the night, it was a matter of hours. As he raced through ancient forests and scaled sheer rock faces, his mind sifted through a millennium of memories, searching for clues Lilith might have inadvertently revealed about the true nature of the prophecy. One memory surfaced with particular clarity, a night 3 centuries ago, when they had stood atop the castle's highest tower, watching a lunar eclipse. "Do you ever fear it will return?" she had asked, her voice unusually vulnerable as the moon disappeared into shadow. "Fear what will return," he had responded, wrapping his arms around her. The hunger that never ceases, the darkness that has no bottom. She had turned in his embrace, her violet eyes reflecting the vanishing moonlight. Sometimes I feel it pressing against the barriers, searching for weaknesses for a way back in. He had kissed her then, attributing her words to poetic melancholy. Now, racing toward a confrontation that might end their millennium together, he recognized the confession for what it was, a rare moment of complete honesty about the burden she had carried alone. Kharkov Castle loomed against the night sky as Alistair approached, its ancient stone silhouette jagged and unwelcoming. Unlike the more refined royal seat they had shared, this fortress predated human architectural refinement. It was built for war, for survival, for containing threats both external and internal. Vampire sentries patrolled the outer walls, but Alistair had no intention of sneaking in. He approached the main gate openly, his stride purposeful. "Halt!" called a guard, leveling a crossbow loaded with silver-tipped bolts. "Identify yourself." "You know exactly who I am," Alistair replied, his voice carrying the authority of 1,000 years of rule. "And you know why I'm here. Take me to her." The guards exchanged uncertain glances before the leader nodded curtly. "The Queen awaits you in the inner sanctum. We are to escort you directly there." 4 guards surrounded him, their weapons never wavering as they led him through the castle's labyrinthine interior. The walls were inscribed with symbols older than any human language, pulsing faintly with eldritch energy that made even Alistair's immortal skin crawl. They descended stone stairs that spiraled deep beneath the castle foundations, the air growing heavier with each step, laden with the scent of ancient magic and fresh blood. Finally, they reached a massive circular chamber hewn directly from the living rock of the mountain. In the center stood a stone altar, and upon it lay Eleanor Blackwood, unconscious but alive, her wrists and ankles bound with silver chains inlaid with occult symbols. Around the altar, 12 elder vampires stood in a perfect circle, chanting in a language that predated civilization. And at the head of the altar stood Lilith, resplendent and terrible in ceremonial robes of deepest black, her hair unbound and floating around her as though suspended in water rather than air. "Right on time, beloved," she said, her voice echoing strangely in the chamber. "You always did have an impeccable sense of dramatic timing." The guards withdrew, sealing the heavy doors behind them. Alistair stood alone before the tableau of ritual sacrifice, his eyes fixed on Lilith's. "You could have told me the truth," he said simply. 1,000 years together, and you never trusted me with your true purpose." Something flickered across Lilith's perfect features. Regret, perhaps, or merely calculation. "Would you have believed me? Would you have accepted that our love, however real it became, began as necessity? That I chose you because your bloodline carried a particular resonance with the sealing magic? We'll never know, will we?" Alistair took a step closer, noting how the elder vampires tensed. "But I know this. I won't allow you to sacrifice Eleanor. Whatever darkness you're containing, we'll find another way." Lilith's laugh held no humor. "Another way? Do you think I haven't searched for one? For 1,000 years I've scoured every grimoire, consulted every oracle, explored every alternative. There is no other way." She gestured to the unconscious woman. "Her sacrifice, and that of the final vessel, the soul of the future, is the only barrier between this world and a darkness that would consume it utterly." "What darkness?" Alistair demanded. "No more riddles, Lilith. If you want me to understand, then help me understand what's at stake." For a moment, Lilith seemed to waver, the mask of queenly detachment slipping to reveal the weight of eons. Then she raised her hand, and the air in the center of the chamber shimmered. "See for yourself," she whispered. The space between them rippled like disturbed water, then formed into images, scenes from a time before human record. Alistair watched in horrified fascination as primordial earth took shape, and with it, a sentience that existed before physical form, a darkness with consciousness, hungry and vast. He saw it find the first humans, possess them, transform them into something neither alive nor dead, but ravenously eternal. The first vampires weren't turned, Lilith narrated softly. They were taken, consumed from within by this entity that learned to divide itself among human hosts. I was among the first, a priestess in a civilization whose name has been lost to time. I thought the voice in my dreams was a god. By the time I recognized it as something else, the transformation had begun. The vision shifted, showing a younger Lilith, still impossibly ancient, discovering a ritual that could contain the darkness, prevent it from spreading beyond those already transformed. The ritual worked, but imperfectly, she continued. Every 1,000 years, as cosmic forces align, the seal weakens. Without renewal through the triple sacrifice, blood of the past, heart of the present, soul of the future, the darkness would escape, consuming humanity until nothing remained but vessels for its hunger. The vision faded, leaving the chamber dimmer than before. Alistair stood motionless, processing the enormity of what he'd witnessed. 1,000 years ago, he said slowly, you needed a bloodline to sacrifice. You chose mine. You turned me to ensure you'd have access to my descendants when the time came. Yes, Lilith admitted, but I didn't expect to love you. That was an unforeseen complication. And now? Now the cosmic alignment approaches its zenith. The blood sacrifice was interrupted. We have until midnight to complete the heart sacrifice, and until tomorrow's eclipse for the final soul sacrifice. If we fail, the seal breaks permanently. Alistair moved closer to the altar, studying Eleanor's peaceful face. The family resemblance was unmistakable, the same proud Blackwood brow he'd seen in the mirror during his human life. And who is to be the soul of the future? He asked quietly, though he feared he already knew. Lilith's eyes met his, violet depths filled with ancient sorrow. The child Eleanor doesn't yet know she carries. A new generation of your bloodline, conceived just weeks ago. Horror crashed through Alistair like a physical blow. She's pregnant, the perfect vessel for the final sacrifice. An unformed soul, still connected to both worlds, the living and the unborn. Alistair's hand moved to his sword hilt, rage and desperation warring within him. I won't let you kill an innocent child. I won't let you kill Eleanor. Then you doom the world to a darkness beyond imagining. Lilith raised her ritual dagger, its obsidian blade gleaming with unnatural light. I've carried this burden alone for millennia, Alistair. I had hoped in the end you would understand the necessity of what must be done. The elder vampires closed ranks around the altar, their chanting intensifying as the ceremonial markings on the chamber floor began to glow with eldritch fire. Lilith's eyes never left Alistair's as she positioned the dagger above Eleanor's heart. The hour approaches, beloved, she said, her voice both tender and implacable. Make your choice. Stand with me in this terrible necessity, or stand against me and watch as everything we've ever known is consumed by the hunger that never ends. Behind Alistair, the chamber doors burst open. Freya stood in the threshold, ancient battle weapons in both hands, her eyes blazing with immortal fury. There is another way, she announced, her gaze locked on Lilith. The Vatican archives held more than just the prophecy. They held its antithesis. Alistair felt the first flicker of hope as Lilith's hand wavered, the dagger still suspended above Eleanor's heart. What antithesis? Lilith demanded. There is no counter-ritual. Freya stepped into the chamber, and behind her emerged Marcel, clutching a scroll so ancient it seemed to crumble at the edges despite careful handling. Not a counter-ritual, Marcel said, his French accent pronounced in his excitement. A substitution clause. The blood need not be of the past, nor the heart of the present, nor the soul of the future, if one offers instead the entirety of an eternal existence. A willing sacrifice of immortality itself. All eyes turned to Alistair as the implication became clear. A way to save his bloodline, but at what might be the ultimate cost. The chamber fell silent. the eldritch energies swirling around them like currents in a midnight sea. Alistair's gaze moved from Eleanor's unconscious form to Lilith's face, searching those violet depths he had adored for a millennium. In her eyes, he saw something he had rarely glimpsed before. Uncertainty. An immortal sacrifice, Lilith whispered, lowering the ritual dagger fractionally. That isn't possible. The ancient texts mention no such alternative. Marcel stepped forward, his movements cautious in the presence of so many elder vampires. Because those who created the original ritual never considered that an immortal would willingly surrender eternity. He carefully unrolled the fragile parchment. It's here, written in blood that still pulses with power after thousands of years. Should one who walks between worlds offer freely what was taken unnaturally, the darkness shall be bound not for a time, but for all time. Alistair moved toward the altar, understanding crystallizing within him like frost patterns on a winter window. It means a vampire, he said softly. A being caught between life and death, sacrificing their immortality, returning what was stolen from the natural order. Lilith shook her head, sudden fear evident in her expression. No, Alistair, you don't understand what you're suggesting. I understand perfectly. He reached the altar, placing his hand gently on Eleanor's arm. He could feel her pulse beneath his fingers, the rhythmic reminder of the humanity he had left behind 1,000 years ago. My immortality for her life, for the child's life, for all the Blackwoods yet to come. The elder vampires shifted uneasily, their chanting faltering as Freya and Marcel moved to flank Alistair. Lilith's composure cracked, a flash of raw emotion breaking through her queenly facade. The substitution would require your complete annihilation, she said, her voice uncharacteristically urgent. Not death as mortals know it, not even final death as vampires fear it. Your very essence would be consumed to forge the permanent seal. Oblivion, Alistair said with unexpected calm. An end to consciousness itself. Yes. Lilith's hand trembled slightly, the obsidian dagger catching the eldritch light. You would cease to exist in any form. No afterlife, no ghostly remnant, nothing. Alistair looked down at Eleanor. This distant daughter of his bloodline who had never known him yet carried his legacy within her. And within her, another life. The newest branch of a family tree he had watched grow from afar for centuries, always separate, always in shadow. How is it done? He asked, meeting Marcel's eyes. The ancient French vampire indicated the center of the ritual circle. The willing sacrifice must stand at the focal point of the seal as the alignment reaches its zenith. The vampire must unmake themselves, reject immortality with their final breath, while the elders channel the released energy into the sealing ritual. Unmake myself, Alistair repeated. You mean I must end my own existence with this? Marcel withdrew a wooden stake unlike any Alistair had seen, carved from what appeared to be the heartwood of an impossibly ancient tree, inscribed with symbols that hurt his eyes to look upon directly. It contains the essence of life itself. When driven into an immortal heart with the intent of sacrifice rather than mere destruction, it transforms undeath back into the natural cycle. A soft, broken sound drew Alistair's attention back to Lilith. A single crimson tear traced down her perfect cheek, catching the light like a ruby. There must be another way, she said, abandoning her ritual stance to approach him. We have hours yet before midnight. We could find another solution. After 1,000 years of searching, you found none, he reminded her gently. And now, faced with the choice between sacrificing innocence or sacrificing myself, the path is clear. Lilith's composure fractured entirely, her ancient facade crumbling to reveal the raw emotion beneath. I cannot lose you, she whispered, her voice so low only he could hear it. Not after everything. Was it real? Alistair asked, the question that had tormented him since discovering her betrayal. Any of it? All of it? Her eyes met his, universes of violet grief. It became real. Whatever calculations brought us together, whatever necessities shaped our beginning, what grew between us was true. I have loved you, Alistair Blackwood, with every fibre of my immortal being. Something tight in Alistair's chest loosened at her words. 1,000 years of memories washed through him, not as bitter betrayal now, but as a complex tapestry of truth and necessity, love and duty intertwined too closely to ever fully separate. "Then honour my choice," he said softly, "as I now understand yours." The chamber's atmosphere shifted as Eleanor stirred on the altar, her eyes fluttering open to take in the otherworldly scene around her. Confusion gave way to fear as she struggled against her bonds. Where am I?" she gasped, her gaze darting frantically around the chamber before settling on Alistair. Recognition flickered in her eyes, though she couldn't possibly have consciously remembered him. I've dreamed of you." "The blood connection," Freya murmured. "She recognizes you on a level deeper than memory." Alistair moved to Eleanor's side, gently working to release her bonds. "You're safe now," he assured her. "No harm will come to you or your child." Eleanor's hand instinctively moved to her abdomen, eyes widening. "How did you know? I only confirmed it myself last week." "It's a long story," Alistair said with a sad smile, "and unfortunately, one I won't be here to tell you." He finished removing the silver chains, helping her to sit up. "But know this. You come from a lineage of survivors, of scholars who faced the darkness and did not flinch. Your child will carry that strength forward." As Eleanor was helped from the altar by Freya, the elder vampires resumed their positions, the ritual energies in the chamber intensifying as midnight approached. The very air seemed to thicken, pressing against Alistair's skin like the weight of the centuries he had witnessed. "The alignment approaches its apex," one of the elders announced, his ancient voice resonating through the chamber. "The sacrifice must be made at the stroke of midnight, or the seal will shatter beyond repair." Marcel handed Alistair the wooden stake, its surface warm against his cold fingers, unnaturally, impossibly warm, as though it contained summer sunlight he had not felt against his skin in 1,000 years. "Thank you, old friend," Alistair said, clasping Marcel's shoulder. "Watch over my descendants when I'm gone." Marcel nodded, emotion rendering him momentarily speechless before moving back to the circle's edge where Freya stood guard over a bewildered Eleanor. Alone in the center of the ritual space, Alistair finally turned to Lilith, who stood frozen in an agony of indecision, torn between her millennia of duty and the love that had defined her last 1,000 years. "Come," he said, extending his hand to her. "Be with me at the end, as you were at my beginning." Lilith moved toward him like a sleepwalker, her ancient eyes never leaving his face, as though memorizing every line and plane. When she reached him, her cool fingers intertwined with his. "I thought we had eternity," she whispered. "We had 1,000 years," he replied gently. "More than most dreams dare encompass. I would not trade our millennium together even to avoid this moment." Around them, the ritual circle blazed with supernatural light as the elders' chanting reached a crescendo. Above, though hidden by layers of mountain rock, the cosmic alignment reached its perfect position, the same configuration that had presided over Alistair's transformation 1,000 years ago. Alistair felt it approaching, a pressure in the air, a thinning of the veil between worlds. He could sense, too, something vast and hungry pressing against that weakening barrier, the primordial darkness waiting to reclaim this world, beginning with those who had escaped its grasp through Lilith's ancient intervention. "It comes," Lilith said, her voice steady once more, though her grip on his hand tightened. "The darkness that has no bottom. Then let us face it together. One last time." Alistair positioned the stake against his chest, directly over his immortal heart. The wood felt alive against his skin, humming with the energy of creation itself, the antithesis of his undead existence. Lilith placed her hand over his on the stake, their fingers intertwining one final time. "I will carry the memory of you through all the ages yet to come," she promised, her voice breaking. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten as long as I walk this earth. Live well, Alistair told her, allowing himself one last indulgence, to reach up and trace the perfect curve of her cheek, to memorize the feel of her skin beneath his fingertips. Find purpose beyond containment. Find joy beyond duty. The chamber trembled as midnight approached. The barrier between worlds grew gossamer thin, and through it Alistair could almost see it, the void-black tendrils of the original darkness reaching through, searching for hosts, for vessels, for a way back into the world of form and substance. "It's time," he whispered, as much to himself as to Lilith. Her violet eyes met his one last time, galaxies of emotions swirling in their depths. "I have loved you across 1,000 years, Alistair Blackwood. I will love you through 1,000 more. And I you," he replied simply, "through oblivion itself." As the first stroke of midnight rang through the ancient stones, Alistair drove the stake deep into his heart. Pain beyond imagining coursed through him. Not the mere physical agony of destruction, but the metaphysical torment of unmaking. He felt every molecule of his immortal being coming undone, his very essence unraveling like a tapestry pulled apart, thread by thread. In that excruciating moment of dissolution, Alistair experienced a strange clarity. He saw his long-dead brother William smiling at him across the centuries. He saw generations of Blackwoods living, loving, dying, the natural cycle he had stepped outside of a millennium ago. He saw Eleanor and her unborn child, and beyond them, branches of his family tree extending into futures he would never witness. And most vividly, he saw Lilith, not as she was now, but as she had been on that first night, standing beside a marble pillar, violet eyes alight with curiosity at the mortal scholar who dared look upon her as an equal. In that pristine moment, before eternity complicated everything, there had been a spark of genuine recognition between them, two souls who, despite the vast differences in their nature and experience, somehow recognized something of themselves in each other. That, at least, had been real from the very beginning. As Alistair's consciousness began to fade, the ritual circle erupted in blinding light. The elder vampires channeled the energy of his sacrifice, weaving it into a new seal, not a temporary barrier this time, but a permanent one. The darkness that pressed against the thinning veil recoiled as it encountered not the weakening resistance of the millennial seal, but the absolute force of an immortal life freely given. Alistair's last sensation was Lilith's arms around him, holding him as he dissolved into light. Her tears fell upon his disintegrating form, each drop containing a century of memories, of love both calculated and genuine, of an eternity shared and now severed. "Goodbye, my love," she whispered against what remained of him. "Find peace in the great mystery that awaits." Then, nothing. The light faded gradually from the ritual chamber, leaving behind an exhausted silence. Where Alistair had stood was now only empty air and softly settling dust that glittered with a strange luminescence before fading into ordinary matter. Lilith remained kneeling at the center of the circle, her hands empty, her face a mask of ancient grief. Slowly, the elder vampires lowered their arms, the ritual complete. The barrier between worlds now stood stronger than it ever had, no longer requiring renewal every millennium, but permanent and impenetrable, forged from the freely given essence of an immortal soul. "It is done," the eldest of them announced, his voice subdued with unexpected respect. "The darkness is contained, not for 1,000 years, but for all time." Freya approached Lilith cautiously, genuine sympathy softening her usually sharp features. "He made his choice, my queen. A worthy end to a noble existence." Lilith rose with the fluid grace of countless millennia, her expression transforming from personal grief to regal composure, though her eyes remained fathomless wells of sorrow. "Prepare quarters for the human woman," she instructed, gesturing toward a bewildered Eleanor. "She will remain under our protection until we can ensure the seal's stability has rendered her bloodline no longer necessary for containment." As the elder vampires dispersed to carry out her orders, Lilith moved to Eleanor, who stood trembling between Freya and Marcel. "I don't understand any of this," Eleanor said, her voice remarkably steady despite her circumstances. "Who was he? Why did he call me family? Why did he—" She couldn't complete the thought. The memory of Alistair's self-sacrifice, too immediate, too impossible to process. Lilith studied her face, seeing echoes of the man she had loved for 1,000 years in this mortal woman's features. "He was the finest soul I have encountered in 7,000 years of existence," she said finally. "And he gave himself to save you, your child, and countless others." She reached out, hesitating briefly before placing her cool palm against Eleanor's abdomen, where the newest Blackwood was just beginning to form. "This child will never know the shadow that has hung over your bloodline since I first encountered your ancestor a millennium ago. You are free now, truly free, to live without the unwitting burden of cosmic necessity." Eleanor's hand moved to cover Lilith's, a gesture of instinctive human connection that startled the ancient queen. "He loved you," Eleanor said quietly. "I could see it, even in those few moments. Whatever else happened between you, that was real." A single crimson tear traced down Lilith's alabaster cheek before she composed herself once more. "Yes," she agreed softly. "That at least was real." In the days that followed, as Eleanor recovered under vampire protection, Lilith withdrew to the highest tower of Kharkov Castle. There, surrounded by artifacts from her millennia of existence, she allowed herself to fully experience the grief she had held at bay since Alistair's sacrifice. On the 7th night, as she stood at the tower's edge watching distant stars, the same stars that had witnessed their first meeting 1,000 years ago, she sensed a presence beside her. Not physical, not even supernatural in the way she understood such things, but something else. A whisper of consciousness that should have been entirely extinguished. "Impossible," she breathed, her hand reaching out instinctively to touch what couldn't possibly be there. For the briefest moment, she felt the ghost of familiar fingers brushing against hers, the merest suggestion of a touch, like the memory of a dream upon waking. Then it was gone, leaving behind only the cool night air and stars that would continue to shine long after even her ancient existence had ended. But in that fleeting contact was a promise that perhaps oblivion wasn't as absolute as they had feared. That perhaps, when her own long journey finally reached its end, she might find him waiting in whatever mystery lay beyond even immortal understanding. Lilith smiled for the first time since Alistair's sacrifice, a small, private expression meant for no living eyes. The Queen of Nocturnalis turned from the balcony edge and descended the tower steps, ready at last to face an eternity without him at her side, but with his memory forever inscribed upon her ancient heart. Some bonds, it seemed, transcended even the finality of oblivion itself.